Welcome everybody to our webinar. This is very much a Kentucky specific webinar. Most of the information, especially with relation to the legal issues, will deal with Kentucky specifically and to some state, in some cases to other states as well. So I don't know how applicable it will be to the Philippines, but we'll give it a try. My name's Dr. Jackie Jacob. I'm one of the poultry specialists here at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky, USA. And the other one is Dr. Tony Pescatori. He will be co-hosting, so he'll be keeping an eye on people coming in. Again, we ask that you please keep yourself muted so that noises from your end do not disturb other participants. Share my screen. Okay, so the webinar, as I said, is on raising ducks specifically for egg production, organized by myself and Tony Pescatori. Who's been writing on it? Oops. Please don't write on the screen either. Okay, so some of the legal issues that I mentioned, again, these are very much Kentucky specific. We do have a publication on it for small scale egg producers. The regulations are very much the same, whether it's duck eggs or chicken eggs. And the regulations determine who you can sell to, who you can buy from, where you can build your duck houses, especially for environmental concerns, how you can dispose of dead birds. Again, it's an environmental concern, as well as producer liability. If someone gets sick from a food product that you sell, they can sue you. So make sure that you have producer liability. Even if they mishandle the eggs, producer liability will help save you from losing your farm because of one problem with eggs. So all producers, regardless of size, must follow all aspects of egg law. This is Kentucky egg law. And one of the conditions is safe handling. Eggs must be refrigerated at a temperature of 45 degrees Fahrenheit or below once they're packaged. All eggs sold must be fit for human consumption, so no cracked eggs, leaking eggs, frozen eggs, moldy, black rot, white rot, blood ring, adhering yolks, bloody whites, incubated beyond the blood ring stage, any filthy eggs, anything covered with decomposing substances cannot be sold for human consumption. As I said, all producers require a license unless they are selling less than 60 dozen eggs per week and they sell directly to the consumer. So you cannot sell eggs to restaurants, grocery stores, or distributors without an egg handling license. So if you are selling less than 60 dozen eggs per week, which if you do the math is about an 80 duck limit, depending on the breed and how efficiently they are producing, then you don't need a license. But if you want to sell to restaurants, grocery stores, or distributors, then you do need a license. And the Kentucky Department of Agriculture is who strictly enforces the quality, labeling, and refrigeration of the eggs. So before you decide to sell eggs, duck or otherwise, you should review the statutes and regulations concerning the sale of eggs in the state of Kentucky. If you're in another state of Texas and Alabama, your rules may be slightly different. I have no idea about the Philippines or India, sorry. So if your eggs are being sold, egg cartons used for packing the eggs must be blank cartons. You have to add to it the nutritional labeling, the refrigeration requirements, the safe handling requirements. You may not use cartons or cases which have been labeled by other businesses. It can only be your cartons, but you cannot reuse cartons. They have to be fresh cartons every time. And on the carton, you have to have plainly and legibly marked as the size of the eggs, the quantity of the eggs, the dealer's name, address, and plant number, or in your case as a producer, the date they were packaged, and an expiration or sell-by date or a best-by date. The expiration and sell-by dates are 30 days past the packing date or less, depending on you. The best-by dates have to be 45 days or less. All cartons and cases are subject to the packaging and labeling requirements as specified in the Kentucky regulations. And if you sell your eggs at a retail or wholesale level, you must have a license. There is an application, that is the page to go to apply. And if you just Google Kentucky egg law, it will take you there to the application. There is an application fee. The fee depends on answers to the questions in the application. Plus, there is also a monthly fee that you have to pay, 2 cents per every 15 dozen eggs sold in Kentucky. Whether that be chicken eggs or duck eggs, you have that fee. So what you have to put on it, according to Kentucky state law, you have to have your producer name and contact information. So this is these eggs that I bought here in Lexington were produced in Mount Sterling, Kentucky, and it has the name and address of that farm. You also have to say that it is perishable and that they must keep it refrigerated at or below 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And you have to have this particular safe handling instructions, this particular wording. It has to say, to prevent illness from bacteria, keep eggs refrigerated, cook eggs until yolks are firm, and cook foods containing eggs thoroughly. And this one, there are no grades for duck eggs. There are grades for chicken eggs, but not duck eggs. So this indicates that these are ungraded eggs. Okay, you have to have a nutrition label on it. This is different than the nutrition label for a chicken egg. The one on the right is the nutrition label for chicken eggs produced that is sent out by USDA. You cannot change that label unless you get it analyzed. This is the label that was on that Kentucky carton of eggs, so it's obviously approved by the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. You can see that a duck egg is considerably larger than a chicken egg. It does have a lot more calories, a lot more fat, but you know, it has all the essential nutrients because eggs are a means of reproduction, and it has to supply everything that the developing embryo needs. So it provides all of those nutrients, making it a great food source. What can you not put on it? You cannot make any nutritional claims. You cannot say omega-3 enriched. You can say that you fed diets high in omega-3s, but then you have to have the feed analysis to prove that that's what you did. You can put things on like raised with no GMO corn, which is what this one did. You can use the term natural, but then you have to define what natural means. You can say raised without antibiotics. You can say free range, cage free, pasture raised. If you say raised without hormones, Then you must include the disclaimer that federal law prohibits the use of hormones in poultry production. And then you can add any certifications like animal welfare, organic, whatever you're getting certified by a third party. You must have a recall plan. You need to be able to remove product from sale that has been deemed unsafe or in violation of FDA or USDA regulations. And there are requirements. You have to be able to locate your product, remove it from distribution, and provide accurate information to all concerned. So it's critical. Sorry, my dog's making noise. Would you stop it? Maintain a log of customers that you shipped product to so that if there is a problem, you can trace it back. There will be that packing date on the eggs, egg cartons, so you can track who all got eggs on that day. Eggs are listed as a hazardous food by USDA, so you need to wash them. Purpose of cleaning eggs is to remove bacteria which might otherwise enter through the shell. So gather eggs frequently and wash them as soon as possible after collection. Do not wash badly soiled or cracked eggs and try to sell them. That's a food safety nightmare. Wash with running water. Do not soak eggs. The one on the left is in a wire basket and lets the water go right through, so it's not they're not sitting in water. So do not do this. Do not soak your eggs. If they're that dirty that you have to soak them, you shouldn't be eating them. Don't use any of these fancy machines because, again, they involve sitting them in the water. You don't want that. This one that says it's really good and you can, don't soak them for more than 25 minutes. I would not use that type of a product. It's not safe. I found this machine. It's an egg washer candler. It comes out of Virginia. It was only $7,000, which is, you know, pretty cheap. Most of the ones that I've seen for small scale are, you know, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000. Seems like the smaller you get, the more it costs. But this one, which was designed by a farmer in Virginia, can do 3,500 eggs an hour. So you can get all through, you know, you can get lots of eggs there. This is chicken eggs in the picture, but it will do duck eggs. Cole is a common manufacturer. This machine is 1,800 to 3,600 eggs per hour, so it's a little bit smaller, but they don't list their price on the website. You would have to ask them for a quote, which usually means it's too expensive. So how do you wash? So the eggs should be less than 90 degrees before you wash them. The body temperature of a duck is like 103, 104, I think. And so make sure it's cooled off nicely before you wash it. The washing temperature needs to be higher than the temperature of the egg. So they recommend 110 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Never have the wash water more than 50 degrees Fahrenheit above the temperature of the egg, as this can cause excess breakage. You can also dip in egg-specific detergent, changing the wash water as necessary. The idea being that if you put the egg in, or run warm water over the eggs, the contents will expand and nothing will get sucked into the egg. If you use cold water, the contents of the egg will contract and that water with all the bacteria will be soaked into or sucked into the egg. So make sure it's warmer than the eggs. You can, after washing, dip in a sanitizing solution, which is warmer than the detergent solution was. Make sure that your water that you're using is potable. That means it's drinkable. If you wouldn't drink it, don't use it for washing eggs. Make sure it has less than 2 parts per million to prevent the growth of bacteria. Never expose eggs to temperatures greater than 128 degrees Fahrenheit during the cleaning, and never put the wet eggs into the cartons or boxes, because wet eggs pick up bacteria very easily and mold can develop. And make sure that you clean and sanitize all your equipment each time it's used to prevent the buildup of bacteria and calcium deposits. As I said, there are no grades specific for duck eggs. Candling, the effectiveness of candling will very much depend on the color of the duck eggs. White eggs are much easier to candle, even with the thicker shell strength of the duck eggs. And it's always good to, make sure you remove any blood or meat spots, or if you missed an egg and you have drakes around, you might have some embryos growing. You don't want that. So make sure that you're, not getting any dry rot or anything like that with the eggs. Again, we have fact sheets that can help you, the marketing regulations, the proper handling and transport of eggs, and the producer liability that I talked about. So why duck eggs? Why would you sell duck eggs? Of course, in the Philippines, duck eggs are more popular than chicken eggs, but if you're in the US, especially Kentucky, why would you want to do duck eggs? Leghorns average over 250 to 280 eggs per hen in a 12-month period. Khaki Campbell ducks that are selected for egg production, and this is very much genetics is important. They can average more than 300 eggs in that same time period. And duck eggs weigh 5 to 8 ounces per dozen more than chicken eggs. So wild ducks will consume 20 to 30% more feed than a similarly sized leghorn. Because of the larger egg size and the more eggs produced, ducks are actually more efficient at producing eggs on a pounds of feed per pound of egg basis. In addition, ducks are typically excellent foragers, so that can help with feed efficiency. It won't eliminate it, but it can help. Come on, why aren't you working? Oops. Ducks are also incredibly resistant to disease, and ducks are more resistant to cold and wet weather. Due to the hardiness, ducks tend to require less elaborate housing than chickens. And ducks, because most egg-type ducks can't fly, they're not high jumpers, then it's easier to confine them. 2 to 3 feet is good enough. With chickens, they'll jump over that easy enough, but egg-type ducks, no. The flavor of duck eggs, a lot of that is controlled by the diet of the producers. So eggs can be tainted. That includes chicken eggs as well as duck eggs. But ducks have found that if they're containing a lot of fish products, you can get a fishy taste. And then depending what's in the body of water, if you're letting them swim, or in the pastures, they could pick up something that could affect the flavor of the duck egg. So you need to remember that. The albumin or egg weight of ducks is somewhat firmer than chicken eggs. So if people are using them to make meringue or angel food cake, it takes more work to whip them up than it does for chicken eggs. Allergies. I've often been told that one, eggs are the most common allergy, and I have a friend who has an egg allergy, but she can eat duck eggs. So I looked it up and see the research on it, and eggs that cause allergies have two types involved. It's immunologically mediated response to egg proteins. 4 of those allergens can be in the egg white and 1 in the yolk. They can cause the death of a person if they have a severe enough allergy. But there is also another type of allergy that's more related to the intestines, and that's what my friend has. So she can't eat chicken eggs without having intestinal disorders, but she can eat duck eggs. So just because someone is allergic to chicken eggs doesn't mean they're not allergic to any of the other eggs. There is some cross reactivity amongst all the eggs. The duck, goose, turkey, duck, goose, and quail eggs all have some cross reactivity with those 5 possible allergens that could be in the eggs. So we're going to look at some breeds. So the Campbell breed is often called the khaki Campbells because of the color, but now there are other varieties. The khaki and the white color are the most common, and they can lay as many as 360 eggs in a year, but that's not as typical for a small operation. Typically anywhere between 165 to 240. The ones that are producing the 360 are the ones that have been selected for egg production. So depending on your source, they may or may not get that. The other thing that's interesting about ducks is that while chickens, we usually,
Hi.
them. What's that? Please keep on mute. What was I saying? Oh yeah, laying hens, chickens typically lay for a year and then we replace them. In the small flocks, maybe 2 or 3 years, you might get some, with each year being less. But a lot of the duck hens can actually lay for 3 to 5 years. Of course, each year is going to be a little bit less, but they tend to be longer living productivity wise than the chickens. And again, they are active foragers, but you still need to provide an adequate diet. You can't just expect them to produce lots of eggs on grass. They're well suited to a variety of climates. They start laying around 20 to 24 weeks of age, and the egg size is anywhere from 75 to 85 grams. The Indian runner is another one. It was developed in Scotland from stock in the East Indies, which is where the Indian runner comes from. They're also highly productive, slightly less than the khaki Campbells, and the eggs are smaller. They're only slightly larger than a chicken egg. They can start laying anywhere from 20 to 28 weeks of age, depending on the brooding. They tend to be more of a forager than the khaki Campbells, and they come in a rainbow of colors with all the different varieties of Indian runners out there. Historically, they've been used in chicken rice paddies to gather weeds, snails, insects, and other small reptiles. And they can be used if you're, some of the banana plantations and things like that in the Caribbean use them as a weed control. Indian runners have also been used for training working dogs. They don't waddle, they run, thus the name runner ducks. And so, if you hatch out some and you have a bunch of males that, of course, aren't going to lay, then you could, possibly use them for training working dogs. Another one is the buff. It's a dual purpose breed. They're also known as Orpington ducks. They lay fewer eggs, but they also have meat. So if you bought straight run, which means they haven't been sexed, then you could use the males for meat and the females for egg production. They lay a white or tinted eggs. They tend to be a little bit more friendly and docile, so might do a little bit better in the small flock. Another one is the Welsh Harlequin. It was developed in Wales. That's the name Welsh. From the khaki Campbells. Again, they're a dual purpose breed. They're a good layer, but they could go broody and sit and hatch a nest of ducklings, which you may or may not want. They can be sexed, but 90% accuracy at hatch based on the bill color. So the color of their bill. Darker bills normally indicate a male, light bills ending in a dark spot, typically for females. Magpies, another one that some people use as an egg-laying strain. The Anconas, I found them very hard to find. Not all hatcheries will carry them. They are a good egg-laying strain, and if you're looking for different egg colors, color ranges from greenish blue color to a white. So if you want some diversity of color in your eggs that you sell, and most of the time I only see 6 eggs rather than the dozen eggs. And there are hybrids. So several of the hatcheries that surround Kentucky sell a Gold Star, which is a hybrid. Some call it the Golden 300. And they lay larger eggs than the khaki Campbells. They have a calmer temperament. The ducklings can be sexed by color, so that sexing is a little more accurate. And they can lay anywhere from 200 to 300 eggs in a year. The white hybrid duck, which is also carried by the same hatcheries, is slightly less eggs. All the progeny are white, the white feathers, they're good foragers. And because the embryos have that lighter color, then they are typically preferred for balut production, which is why it was developed by these hatcheries. Some think of the Peking as, as the most breed that most people think of. They are seasonal layers, so they don't lay throughout the year. But because they are relatively large compared to the egg-laying type strains, they consume nearly twice as much feed. So they're going to be a lower feed efficiency. They're more of a meat duck, which we'll be talking about in a few weeks. So they're not a great choice for egg production. So where do you get your birds? You can buy them mail order. And in Kentucky, this was at the Tractor Supply. You can purchase them at your usual feed stores depending on the time of year. If you know a local breeder, you could also use them. Okay, so brooding and rearing of the baby, it says baby, yeah, it is baby ducklings. So much like baby chicks, waterfowl can be brood and reared the same. The sum of the differences, waterfowl grow much faster than chicks. So they require more floor space, they require more feeder space, and they require heat for a shorter period of time because of that fast growth rate. The flooring can be concrete, wood, dirt, or gravel. It needs to be covered with a thick layer of litter, which can be crushed corn cobs, wood shavings, chopped straw. It should be chopped straw or sawdust or other commercial litters. Try not to use too fine of a litter, so the sawdust could be a problem. When they're young, trying to distinguish between feed. Make sure that they are free of mold and change the litter whenever it gets wet or dirty. You can raise waterfowl on wire. You need to use a small mesh, less than 3/8 of an inch. Do not raise bantam ducks or small-legged waterfowl on wire, though, because the hawks could get caught. But those are not types of ducks that you would keep for egg production anyway. Don't use newspaper or any other slippery type of material, because that can result in leg injuries. If you have any questions, please just type them in the chat box. Tony is keeping an eye on it, and if it's related to what I'm talking about, he'll interrupt me. Otherwise, please keep yourself on mute. So floor space, they need plenty of room to grow. Crowding of the ducklings will reduce growth rate and increase mortality. So for the first 2 weeks, they only need about 1/2 square foot per bird. Double the floor space every 2 weeks because of their fast growth rate. Until so every 2 weeks. So until 4 weeks of age. Okay, I don't know what that says. Forget it. So for the first 2 weeks, you need 1/2 square foot per bird. Please mute yourself. By 3 weeks, they need 1 square foot per bird. 4 weeks, 2 square feet, and by 5 weeks, 4 square feet per bird. Tony, can you mute that person? Are you there, Tony? I think I got him. Okay. So when you place them, you want it at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Place them under the heat source when you first place them. By 10 days, reduce the temperature 5 degrees. And then each week after that, reduce the temperature 5 degrees Fahrenheit. By 70 degrees Fahrenheit, you shouldn't need any more heat. Measure the temperature about 3 inches above the litter so that it's at bird height. You don't want it at your height, because the temperature that they're getting down there is different than the temperature that you're getting up where you are. If it's extremely cold outside, instead of reducing the temperature 5 degrees each week, just reduce it 3 degrees Fahrenheit. That will help give them more time to build up resistance to the colder temperatures. By 6 weeks of age, they shouldn't require heat. They're mostly well feathered and can take care of themselves if you want to put them out on range, but make sure that you provide them with grit. We recommend brooder guards for the first week. Brooder guard is like a 12-inch high cardboard or hinged wood that circles about 3 to 4 feet from the edge of the heat source. It helps to prevent drafts. It prevents birds from huddling cold in the corners. It keeps the birds near the heat, and it keeps them close to the feed and water. And you can take it out after about a week. So while we talked about
Jackie, Jackie, someone has asked to slow down a little bit.
Okay, sorry. I'll try. My dog is driving me nuts. So the good managers will look at the behavior of the birds rather than depend solely on the thermometer. So once the young birds learn where the heat, feed, and water is, they will move to an area where they feel comfortable. So the birds should look like what you're seeing here, where they are well spread out within that brooder guard. If the birds are all huddling under the heat source, that tells you that they are cold and they're trying to get as close to the heat source as possible. So you need to increase the heat. If they are going to the outside edges, that means it's too hot. And so you need to reduce the heat. So observe the behavior of the birds and adjust accordingly. regardless of what the thermometer says. Use the thermometer as a guide, but do your adjustments based on the birds. When placing hatchlings, it's important for them to learn where water is. When they first hatch, God, it's changing automatically. When they first hatch, they have the yolk sac remaining in them, so they have enough feed for a few days, but water is essential. So dip their bills in the water so that they learn where that water is as soon as possible.
Jackie, someone's asking, what's the ideal watts of light that should be used for brooding for ducks?
They don't it's very similar to chickens. You don't need a bright source. 60 watts would be good for the first couple of weeks. Once they learn where the food and water is, you could even turn it down a little bit. So it's pretty much the same as you would do with chicks, you can do with ducks. I hope that answers the question. Waters. So the type of waters that you need depend on how many you have, how many birds do you have, what are the weather conditions, are they likely to freeze, what types of birds, you know, how the runner ducks that stand upright or the khaki Campbells, the supply system for the waters, do you have to fill them automatically or is that done? Can you set it up so you don't have the problem? The location of the birds, how far away are they from the water source, and the height of the birds. You need to be able to adjust accordingly. So, but at the same time, ducks have been raised on nipple drinkers. Most ducks, however, like to dip their beaks in the water. So a lot of the publications will say having it so that they can fully immerse their face, but not get themselves into the water. The nipple drinkers can be used. It's less of a water problem, and they don't need to bathe. But if you're using something that's going to be spilling a lot of water, try and keep it outside the house as much as possible in the summer so that your poultry house is not getting too wet. I found this one on Amazon. It's a thermo duck water. It comes heated and unheated. So if the temperatures are going to cause you problems with frozen water, then you might want to get the heated one. If you have electricity, of course, to run it. The water cup allows the ducks to drink and they can clean their bills in there, but they can't get in there themselves to play in the water. There's removable filters, and it's got a 2.5 gallon reservoir with a spill-proof cap and a handle that makes it easy to use. You can get an automatic water. I saw this one online as well. You just hook up a hose to it. The large access holes on each side, the birds can get in there. They can dip their beaks if they want to, but they themselves cannot get in there. So they're not going to be pooping in there. They're not going to cause as much problems. You do need to clean them frequently because you will get ducks, you know, with mouthfuls of feed going in there to drink. And so you could get water, food contamination, and you do not want mold. Ducks are particularly sensitive to mold. So keep your water clean by, you know, preventing the birds from bathing or sticking their feet in it. And these, as I said, these are fully automatic. They have a internal float that regulates the level. All you got to do is hook up the hose. This one was online as well. It works best in low pressure systems, such as adding them to a bucket. You buy the individual cups and then you drill a hole in the buckets and put them on. Tony, I see 6 people in the waiting room, says on mine. And it won't go away, so must be there. If using these types of gallon drinkers that are often used for chickens, after 2 weeks, you need to place the waters on a wire cover stand about 4 inches high. This will help reduce the spillage into the litter to keep the litter dry. So you can easily set something up here, like in this duck facility. You can see that the waters are on these little slats. The birds go up there to drink, and any spilt water goes down and is not contaminating the litter of the pens where they are. You want something clean, something that's easy to clean up. Always provide convenient access to feed and water. Don't keep feeders and waters too close, or they'll contaminate the water with the feed. So you want the water and feed a little bit farther apart. Chicken feeders and waters can be used if the openings are large enough for the waterfowl to get their heads in. And then increase the trough space frequently to avoid crowding as the birds grow. In terms of nutrition, try to give only unmedicated feed to cause any possible adverse reactions to the medications. By law here, you can't put any antibiotics or anything like that in the feed without a veterinarian's prescription anyway. So, try to avoid any of the typical chicken type medications. If it's available, you can use a starter mash formulated specifically for waterfowl. If you can't get one, then you could use a chicken meat one for the first 3 weeks. They prefer mash at that age because the pellets are too small, too big. So after 3 weeks, switch to a grower feed. And here the ducks prefer the pellets. And pelleting also reduces the amount of fines in the feed. It also reduces wastage. So they get these little bite-sized things, all that food put together. So you can get a pelleted feed after the first 3 weeks. So in terms of the nutrition, again, for the first 2 to 3 weeks, you can use a chicken meat feed unmedicated if you can't find an actual waterfowl feed. And then you need lower crude protein after that. And then breeders for egg production, they're going to have increased calcium levels as well as some of the other nutrients. And they're going to have a minimum of 15 to 16% protein. As I said, best to avoid medicated feeds. And ducks are extremely sensitive to molds and mycotoxins. And in terms of planning, an adult duck eats about 1/3 to 1 pound of feed each day. So when you're calculating how much feed you need, you can use that as a sort of a base mark. So ducklings that are 3 weeks old can be fed small leafy greens or allowed on limited range. And to prevent digestive problems, feed grit, which is basically just a bunch of rocks, to allow them to easier digestion. Swimming. People often think of ducks as having to provide a bathing area. That is not necessary. Ducks don't need to bathe to remain healthy. Providing them with swimming water can, result in wet housing, could be a health issue. And don't let, if you are going to put out a pond or a swimming pool or whatever, don't let young waterfowl swim for the first 3 weeks. They don't have the insulation and the waterproofing. They can become chilled. They tend to crowd and can flip over and causing death. I know that when we used to raise ducks, sometimes the ducklings would get caught in the water and drown. So be very careful if you're providing water for your ducks. Don't need it, but if you want it, be careful. Okay, ducks have well-oiled feathers and thick coats of down, so they're amazingly resistant to cold and wet weather. Typically, a windbreak is needed with some bedding on, the windbreak to prevent the protected side. Dry litter can be sufficient where temperatures, drop to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. But the main problem with that is predators. Because they can't fly, they are prone to being predated on. So if you have a predator problem, you may need to be able to lock them up at night. For egg-laying ducks, feed conversion and egg yields can be improved if they're housed at nighttime. Whenever temperatures regularly fall below 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, below freezing, because of the cold weather, they're going to eat more feed to try and stay warm. So you're going to lose some of that feed efficiency if you're letting them out there like that. An interesting physiology thing is that why don't duck eggs freeze? Well, ducks have a countercurrent heat exchange system between the arteries and veins in their legs. So warm arterial blood that's flowing to the feet passes by this exchange system with the cold returning venous blood from the feet. This warms up the venous blood so that you're not cooling off the deep core temperature, and it's why ducks are less prone to frostbite than are chickens. So they can, have their feet in ice and not lose all that body heat. So that's why they're a little bit more resistant than chickens to cold temperatures. A little bit of physiological tidbit. So housing, that needs to be well vented because of the wet droppings, needs good drainage. You don't want water building up. It can be a shed-like structure like shown here. You don't need raised nests like you do with chickens. In fact, they can't get up to them. Perches, again, egg-laying type chickens do not perch. You don't need dropping pits. They can be very simple production systems. Just you want good, well ventilated. And if you're going to house them at night, you want 3 to 5 square feet of floor space per duck. If you're going to keep them in for a long time, so if it's like, weeks of cold weather, or you're keeping them inside on a regular basis, then you need to increase it from anywhere to 8 to 15 square feet in order to keep the bedding reasonably dry and sanitated. You don't want to have a buildup of manure that's going to cause ammonia to develop in the poultry house and make the birds sick. Nest boxes, this is for egg production, so you need to provide nest boxes. They can be very simple nest boxes, right? They 12 to 14 inches in size, which is typical even of a chicken nest box. You want one nest box for every 4 to 5 ducks, and you want bedding in there, to keep the eggs as clean as possible. There are other types of things you can get if you don't want to use the ones that I showed you there. Basins with bedding in it, or even the old crates that they used to use for milk cartons can be used as long as you put in the bedding material. So ducks, just like chickens, come into production with increasing day length. So 3 to 4 weeks before they're due to start egg production, you can increase the hours of light per day to about 17 hours. For chickens, it's usually 14 to 16 hours. But for ducks, you want like 17 hours of light per day. If you're collecting fertile eggs, then the males need to be light stimulated 2 weeks before the females in order to be peaking at the same time. So if you're going to be adding supplemental light, because we don't have 17 hours of light on a regular basis, so if you want to keep them laying throughout, and it does not have to be a bright light, right? You can use a timer like the one there that shows that the lights are going to be on for 17 hours, but then use the dusk to dawn light bulbs. So the light bulbs only come on when it's dark outside. So you're not running the lights that full 17 hours. They're getting the natural day length, and then you're supplementing it with these dusk to dawn light bulbs to get them that 17 hours, and they'll keep laying through the winter. You just have to watch out that your eggs don't freeze. Provide grit to the layers at all times, especially if they're on pastures. It helps to break down feed. You might, just like you do with chickens, have some oyster shell or limestone on the side to help them with the calcium calcium for the eggshells. But don't use oyster shells as grit. It's a calcium source, not a grit. If you've got your ducks out on pastures, you're going to have problems with eggs being laid out on the range, and that's going to give you dirty eggs. You don't want dirty eggs. So waterfowl tend to lay eggs earlier than chickens. So collect eggs around 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. every day, and then collect again a little later in the day. That way they're not sitting there getting dirty. So don't wash and sell excessively dirty eggs. As I said, that's a health risk. Don't soak eggs. Make sure that the water is warmer than the eggs. This opens it up, prevents them from absorbing the bacteria into them when they're in the water. So as a reminder, eggs should be below 90 degrees Fahrenheit when you wash them. The wash water should be 110 to 120. Never go 50 degrees above the temperature of the egg. You can dip in egg-specific detergent. Changing the wash water is necessary. You can dip in sanitizing solution with 200 parts per million of chloride. That's warmer than the detergent. But I need to point out that Salmonella enteritidis is a salmonella bacteria that can inhabit the reproductive tract. And so the eggs can be laid already with salmonella inside them. So washing's not going to help with those, which is why you need to always use proper storage with refrigeration below 45 degrees, so that bacteria that is in the eggs already doesn't grow. When it's low levels, it's not going to be an issue, especially if you cook it properly. But if you allow it to get warm, you're going to get that bacteria growing, and it's going to be a food safety issue. In terms of handling ducks, you don't want to carry ducks by their legs, like we do with chickens. Their legs are weaker and are easily disjointed or broken. So if you need to catch a duck, slowly walk them into a small area or corner. Don't chase them. Never catch or carry them by their legs. So place one hand firmly around the neck near the body. Place the other hand over the bird's back and wings. Then release the neck and gently slide the hand palm under the breast and abdomen so that the bird's weight is supported on your forearm. Lift the bird under your arm. Hold the legs gently between your fingers to prevent them from scratching you. They do have claws. And you can hold the wings to prevent them from flapping. Those wings can injure you. If you're carrying them for short distances, medium and lightweight waterfowl, which is what most egg-laying types are, can be carried by grasping the wings near the body. But do not use this for heavier ducks or geese. It will hurt their wings. Sexing ducks. Sexing ducks is much easier than trying to sex with geese. Male ducks have drake feathers, which are the feathers in the tail there that curve up. These are runner ducks, male on the left, female on the right. And you can see that with the presence of the drake feathers, some call them sex feathers, you can tell the males from the females. But you can also do it on the basis of how they sound. Mature males, it has a soft and hoarse sound, whereas mature females has more of a quacking sound. So this is a male. Oh, I don't know if I turned it up so you could hear the sound. Can you hear that, Tony?
No.
Okay, let me share my screen again, and this time I will share for sound. Oops, I lost my spot. Where are you? Okay. Try again. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the male. Oh, come on. This is the male. And this is the female. There are slight differences. For geese, the only main method for determining them is vent sexing, but you can also use vent sexing for ducks if the drake feathers and the sound don't happen. Waterfowl are one of the few poultry species that actually have a penis. Mature males have a male organ that becomes unsheathed, but in some birds it can be difficult to make it come up. So waterfowl may be male even if that screw-like organism doesn't come up. This is what the female look like. So they only have the presence of the female genital eminence called a rosette. That basically tells you it's female, not male. So this compares the male with the female. So you can vent sex waterfowl, including ducks, based on vent sexing. In terms of the diet, I talked a little bit before about the importance of feeding a complete feed. In that it's very much like trying to have a nutritious meal for you. So the grains provide the energy. So the energy is usually a cereal of some sort, corn, wheat, barley, depending on what part of the country or what part of the world you are in. The proteins provide the essential amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein, and they are typically provided by soybean meal, field peas, canola meal, sunflower seed meal, again, depending on where you are located in the country or the world, or whether you're going organic. The fruits and vegetables provide a lot of the essential vitamins and trace minerals, and we usually provide those in a premix. And then, of course, we need the calcium and phosphorus. And for a poultry diet, those are usually provided by limestone or dicalcium phosphate. So you want to provide a complete feed that is balanced for all those nutrients. If you add bread or high carbohydrate foods, then you overwhelm it with energy and you start to get deficiencies. So feed the complete feed and never, ever give ducks bread. Okay, what is the contribution of pastures? Ducks will forage. They particularly like grasses, but they'll pretty much eat anything. They're not cows, so they don't digest it efficiently, but they get more out of it than chickens because they eat more of it. So they have a bigger throughput. So if they're on pasture, they're going to eat a lot of it, and so you're going to have more manure. So that's always important to remember. I wouldn't count on more than 5% of your feed coming from pastures, but if they're good foragers, they may get some. One of the nutritional requirements that is peculiar for ducks is the B vitamin, B3 niacin. Ducks require almost 2 times what's required by chickens. Ducklings require 70 milligrams per kilogram feed, whereas laying hens, it goes down to 50. So it's very important when they're growing. And that is because they don't have the ability to synthesize niacin from tryptophan. Tryptophan is an amino acid. They don't do it efficiently. And the availability of niacin in grain and grain byproducts is very low. So if you're using a chicken diet, it may be low in niacin. If you're mixing your own feed and not using a good vitamin premix, you could also end up with a niacin deficiency. And the clinical signs of a niacin deficiency depend on the severity. Most typical includes the bowing of the legs or the enlargement of the hock joints. They can become so crippled and weak that they cannot walk. So as a health and welfare issue, a nutritional deficiency of niacin can be a problem. So niacin is widely distributed in foodstuffs of both plant and animal origin, but as I said, in the grains, the availability is quite low. So if it looks like you're having a niacin deficiency, you can supplement. This is the one time when it's okay to supplement. Peas are a great source, and ducks love peas. You can add distiller's grains, brewer's yeast. Beets, surprisingly, are a good source. Fish can be, but you got to be careful or you're going to get fishy eggs. Sunflower seeds and certain oil seed meals can also work. And if worse comes to shove, you can always buy the human tablets in the health food stores. They sell niacin, and you can add it to the feed or water. So make sure you adjust for the dosage depending on the age of the birds and what is in your diet itself. Another nutritional problem is angel wing. It's also called airplane wing, slipped wing, crooked wing, and drooped wing. The last joint of the wing is twisted with the wing feathers pointing out laterally instead of against the body, like you can see here. It actually occurs more often in males than in females. It's typically due to a high calorie diet, especially one that's really high in proteins, which is again why you should feed a complete feed formulated specifically for ducks. I realize these are geese, but it does give you an idea of the range that you can get with angel wing, got my mouth. And a vitamin D, E, or manganese deficiency will also cause the same problem. So do not feed ducklings feed that is intended for chicks unless you're really desperate, because there aren't any. Ensure that the protein level is no greater than 20%. Make sure your ducks get exercise and are not kept in unnecessarily hot conditions. And as I said before, bread and other high carbohydrate foods should never be fed to ducks or other waterfowl. Some of the diseases, I won't go into great detail on each of them, but duck plague is the duck virus enteritis. It's caused by it's a contagious disease caused by a herpes virus, and the severity of the disease depends on the actual strain of the virus and the resistance of the type of duck that you have. Injury to the foot pad can get infected, so you get bumblefoot with that one. Avian influenza, there are different types of avian influenza, and they are named based on the little projections that come out of the coating. So there's 18 different hemagglutinins or H's and 11 neuramidases or N's, and so they're named based on the hemagglutinin and neuramidase they contain. And there are highly pathogenic avian influenza strains and low pathogenic avian influenza strains, which cause death, in poultry specifically, either a lot or a little. H5s and H7s tend to be highly pathogenic, and any flock that is found to be positive for H5, H7, that is a reportable disease. You have to let the state veterinarians know, and they may depopulate to try and prevent the industry from getting avian influenza. And while waterfowl are typically less susceptible to avian influenza, some of the new strains that have been coming out of Asia have actually been making waterfowl sick. So I said there are highly pathogenic and low pathogenic, and the high ones, they get 95% mortality in 5 days. This is for non-waterfowl. And the low pathogenic, lower mortality, they don't typically depopulate unless it's an H5 or H7. They will often just process them early if it's a meat bird. In 2014-15, we had an HPAI outbreak here in the United States. It was the largest animal health disaster in USA history. We had to destroy over 50 million birds, which cost the US $880 million. You cost the USDA for that destruction, an economic loss of 3.3 billion. So we do not want a repeat of it. And the way that an outbreak occurs is that you have a reservoir of the highly pathogenic avian influenza virus, which has somehow infected a susceptible population of poultry. And a lot of that comes from the migratory waterfowl. So this just shows you some of the worldwide migratory waterfowl routes. And you can see that a lot of them meet up in the North Pole. And so strains from one part of the world can mingle with birds from another part of the world and can bring down highly pathogenic organisms that could affect North America. So in North America, we have 4 migratory waterfowl flyways. We have the Pacific, the Central, the Mississippi, and the Atlantic. And so Kentucky is in the Mississippi flyway. Texas, you're going to be in the Central and Alabama, you're also in the Mississippi Flyway. So we do have migratory waterfowl who fly over us, and we only had one detected, which was a wild bird, because they do monitor for avian influenza, but you can see that it affected many different parts of the United States. I got my slides out of order. So this is a continuation of the duck plague. You can just have sudden high persistent flock mortality. Sometimes affected ducks are found dead, no prior clinical signs. The ones that typically show signs are Muscovy ducks. Some of the affected males may have a prolapsed penis, and the ducks will often appear so weak that they're unable to stand or hold their heads up. If you get clinical signs, it could be bloody or greenish watery diarrhea, and it'll stain around the vent area, which is, where the fecal material comes out. There's an increased water intake due to excessive thirst, and, generalized signs of lethargy, fever, reduced appetite, partially closed eyelids, light sensitivity, ruffled feathers, depression. Those are very generalized illness signs and not necessarily specific of duck plague, but keep an eye out on the mortality levels and your fecal material. Ducklings, they tend to get lacrimation, which is tearing in the eyes. They become dehydrated. There's weight loss. There can be bloody discharge from the nares, which are basically the nostrils. As I said, the blood-stained vent. You could get bloody fluid in the mouth. They get cyanosis, so that the beaks could become a blue color. Conjunctivitis, which is an inflammation of the eye. Ducks of all ages are susceptible, but it's more severe in adult ducks. Most occur during the spring to early summer, and there is a vaccine available if you have it in your area. On necropsy, and I recommend, if you're going to get a sudden loss of birds of any kind, if you're trying to make money off them, get them to the state diagnostic lab immediately to get them analyzed to make sure you can identify the problem. So on necropsy, ducks that die of duck plague have hemorrhaging in the heart, liver, esophagus, and intestines. There might be oral ulcers in the mouth, sometimes under the tongue, and surviving ducks may have scabs and scars in their mouth. And the diagnosis is necessary because you need to differentiate it from duck virus hepatitis, necrotic enteritis, lead poisoning, and pasteurellosis are other possible problems. Duck plague can be vertically transmitted from breeding ducks to the ducklings through the egg, and any ducks that recover will remain lifelong carriers. So if your flock has it, you want to depopulate and start all over again. It can also be transmitted horizontally through direct contact from one infected bird to another, or indirectly from contacted environment or contaminated equipment or something like that. Migratory waterfowl or free-ranging waterfowl are known to be silent carriers of the virus. So if you're having your ducks out on water and wild ducks are coming, not only is it a risk for avian influenza, it is also a risk for duck plague. Incubation period is anywhere from 3 to 78 days. You get initial clinical signs. Most dogs die within 1 to 5 days. So you're more likely to have it if you're adopting or rescuing ducks that were dumped in a pond where they were exposed to wild ducks. If you allow your domestic ducks contact with wild waterfowl, or you're letting your ducks swim in water used by wild waterfowl, or allowing the wild waterfowl to swim in your water. So anything near wild waterfowl can be an issue. Pasteurellosis, also called avian cholera, avian hemorrhagic septicemia, is caused by Pasteurella multocida. Ducks over 4 weeks of age are more susceptible than ducks less than 4 weeks. In the acute form, they become septicemic, which causes death. The chronic form, which is less frequent, can have asymptomatic infections. So the flock could be infected and you don't know it. So bringing in ducks from an unknown source could also be a problem. So avoid swap meets. Clinical signs, sometimes only seen a few hours prior to death, which are, loss of appetite, ruffled feathers, increased breathing. The diarrhea is initially watery and whitish, but then changes to a greenish mucus. You could get mucus discharge from the mouth, and again, cyanosis. So the bill or the skin can turn blue right before it dies. It's not vertically transmitted, but it can be transmitted from bird to bird through the excretions from the mouths and nostrils, as well as from the eyes. It enters through inhalation or ingestion, and also through the contact with the eye or any wounds. And raccoons, domestic dogs, both domestic and feral cats, are known to be carriers of pasteurellosis. So if you have a predator problem, you could also have a pasteurellosis problem. So minimize the risk of predator attacks, maintain good sanitary practices, regularly clean where your ducks are kept, ensure your duck pens have proper drainage so that it's not becoming muddy with standing water. That always increases the risk of disease. Duck viral hepatitis is a reportable disease in the United States. So if you suspect that you have duck viral hepatitis, you are by law required to report it to your veterinarian or the state or federal veterinarian. There are vaccines available if you have it in your area. Again, duck viral hepatitis is highly contagious, often fatal for ducklings less than 4 weeks. It rarely occurs over 4 weeks. If infected, they have a greater chance of survival if they're older, but they may shed the virus in the feces for up to 8 weeks afterwards. The onset is rapid. The virus spreads quickly through susceptible flock members. The incubation period is about 24 hours, and most are dead within 3 to 4 days. So if you see any signs of ill health, get them to the diagnostic lab. Weakness, depression, reluctance to move, close to death, you may get spasmodic contractions in their legs, causing them to fall to their side and kick out their legs like they're paddling. They die with their head and neck drawn backwards. Brown rats are thought to act as a reservoir for the virus. So make sure you keep your rodent control up to date. So disease prevention, you want a biosecurity program to keep out all the different kinds of organisms that could cause problems. Whoops. Vertical transmission is when it goes through the egg to the offspring, and horizontal transmission is when it goes from bird to bird, whether it's duck or chickens. And you can spread it with vehicles, you can spread it with equipment, egg flats, things like that. So your boots, your clothing, including your baseball caps, if you're sharing manure spreaders, tractors, trucks, front end loaders, any of those things can spread disease. So to prevent disease, restrict access to the poultry property and the flock. So a fence to keep them out is always a good idea. Have a log of anybody who does come on, and try and keep out, game birds and migratory waterfowl as much as possible. You should have a set of clothing that is specific for dealing with your birds, and don't wear that to a feed store or any other place where you might get them contaminated. Clean all cages, change food and water daily. Make sure that if you use any equipment that's come in contact with droppings, cages, tools, remove the manure from the equipment and clean. Make sure that you properly dispose of any dead birds. If you've been somewhere with vehicles, make sure that they are washed before they are brought back onto the farm. Don't share equipment, but if you do, make sure that they are brought back clean and disinfected before they get to the property. Don't want to wash them on the property. You want to wash them before they get to the property. Know all the signs of disease, and early detection is basically, critical to preventing its spread and get it to the diagnostic lab. So report any sick birds immediately. If you have a local veterinarian that will help you, go for it. But you want to, through your local veterinarian, get them to the diagnostic lab as soon as possible. And in the selling of eggs, just a reminder that all must follow all aspects of egg law. And I had mentioned that eggs must be fit for human consumption, which included in the definition incubated beyond the blood ring stage. But there is an exception, and that is balut. Balut is a Philippine word for fertilized duck eggs, in which the embryos are allowed to develop for a time before the eggs are hard cooked. They're considered a great delicacy and are thought to have therapeutic value as foods for invalids. And because they are considered an ethnic food, they are exempt from inspection and grading. That does not mean you can just do what you want. They fall under the food code, which defines what a balut is. And in the definition and the food code for eggs, it does not include balut. So it does include the duck eggs if you're selling them as shell eggs. But if you're fertilized eggs and you incubate them, they become an animal, which is balut, and does not follow as a definition for eggs. So although they're, exempt from inspection, that does not mean that you can just do anything to sell them. For balut, duck eggs are incubated for 18 of the 28 days. And as I mentioned, Salmonella enteritidis can be in the eggs, and you're incubating the eggs. So there is a potential for the pathogenic Salmonella enteritidis to cause health issues. You need a food handler's license to be able to sell balut in Kentucky. If you use chicken eggs, 14 days out of the 21 instead. There has a specific time and temperature control for food safety. So baluts are typically boiled and packed in salt before sale. Again, this is a processing, so you need a handler's license food handler's license in order to market balut. It has to be cooked to at least 165 degrees Fahrenheit for less than 1 second. So you really have to be careful. And I want to remind everyone that whenever you handle poultry, always wash your hands. If you handle anything that gets manure on it, anything that could come in contact with the birds, wash your hands with antibacterial soap. If you have kids, make sure that they are not playing with the birds and putting their thumbs in their mouths. You want to supervise any young children that are handling poultry. Make sure that they wash their hands. We have some resources available for you. Our department website, smallflocks.net, not .com, .net, will take you to our website. We also have the Facebook page, which is where these were advertised and where you registered. But we also have general poultry information. We have information for poultry youth programs. We have urban poultry stuff, we have consumer education materials, and we do have a link for commercial poultry production. We have several fact sheets, including the ones I previously mentioned, plus why have my hens stopped laying, and molting if you need to. That's more for chicken flocks, but if you needed to do it for your duck flock. Nationally, we have, I organized the National Cooperative Extension's version for small and backyard flocks. It's at poultryextension.org. We also have a Facebook page. We have monthly webinars that come up. I think Tony's giving it next week on raising quail for meat and release. We have lots of articles. We have a blog. You can ask an extension where you type in your question and it gets sent out to an expert to ask. If you are in Kentucky, you're going to get a faster reply if you email me directly. That's my email, jackie.jacob@uky.edu. And that is what I have. Do we have any questions, Tony?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Ducks don't come into heat. I saw that question. How to know when the ducks are in heat? Ducks don't come into heat. That's a mammalian thing. Yes, they collect between 6 and 9 because it's it is when they lay most of their eggs before then. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. You're most welcome, Dito. We ran a lot over, so I'll give you a few more minutes to see if you have any more questions.
Make mention of their certificates.
If you were here for the whole time, email me and I will see what I can do. It's not typically something we do, especially if you're not in Kentucky, but oops, why did it go to the waiting room? Ouch, stop it. Sorry, I'm talking to my dog, who has decided she wants to bug me.
I had a question on how do you tell if an egg is fertilized or not?
The only way that you know is to either break it open and look, which then of course you can't sell it, or incubate it and see if an embryo develops. Candling does not show you whether or not it is fertile or not. This is being recorded and the recording will be up probably tomorrow morning. We don't typically give out our PowerPoints.
Which species of duck produces the largest egg?
I think you need breed of ducks. Typically, the Khaki Campbell is the better egg-laying breed for size than the Indian Runner. The Indian Runner duck eggs are only slightly larger than chicken eggs, whereas the Campbell eggs are definitely much larger. Pekin eggs are the largest, but they're not very good egg layers.
Any other questions?
We already had a webinar on raising quail for eggs through the e-extension. If you go there, you will be able to find the recording. Okay. Let's see. Any more questions? Can't mute them. Whoops. Okay. How to evaluate the consumption in the pasture and adaptation. It's really hard because of the differences in crops, how you manage the crops. As I said, the amount that pasture can contribute to it is probably at the most 5%. Can thermal scanners distinguish if duck is sick? It can distinguish if it has a temperature. If you know what the regular temperature is with the scanner and then you look at it and it goes up, that would tell you that it has a temperature that which tells you it probably sick. But just because it has it doesn't have a temperature doesn't mean it's not sick. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else.
Okay. I think we can end there.
Yep, stop the recording.